A racist restaurant owner named Anton Vivaldi kicks out a black couple, Darius and Michelle Lewis, on their 15th anniversary. But when he found out who they really are, the damage he made was beyond repair. How will Anton's actions come back to haunt him? And what will the couple's journey reveal about the harsh realities of racial discrimination? If you're new, make sure to subscribe and join us in every new journey. Chateau Lumiere stood as a beacon of exclusivity in the heart of the city. Its reputation for catering to the elite drew lawyers, politicians, and celebrities alike. On this particular evening, Darius and Michelle Lewis, a pair of accomplished professors, arrived to celebrate their 15th wedding anniversary. As they passed through the grand doors, the atmosphere noticeably shifted. Anton Vivaldi, owner of Chateau Lumiere, caught sight of the couple, and a flicker of discomfort crossed his face. Despite their reservation, he led them to a less desirable table, tucked away in a corner. Darius and Michelle exchanged a quick glance, maintaining their calm composure. Their quiet poise hinted at layers Anton had yet to uncover. The couple's quiet dignity seemed to fuel Anton's growing agitation. But what hidden truth about Darius and Michelle would turn Anton's world upside down, revealing the true cost of his prejudice? As the evening wore on, Anton Vivaldi's discomfort transformed into a simmering resentment. He watched Darius and Michelle from across the room, his eyes narrowing with each passing moment. The couple appeared at ease, their laughter an intimate conversation, a stark contrast to Anton's mounting tension. Other diners paid little attention to the pair, focused on their own meals and companions. But for Anton, their presence was like a splinter in his mind, impossible to ignore. He paced near the kitchen, muttering under his breath and casting frequent glances at their table. "Can you believe they're still here?" Anton hissed to his head waiter. "Make sure their service is slow, very slow." The staff, uncomfortable with Anton's instructions, hesitated before complying. They delayed bringing water refills and taking the couple's order. When the food finally arrived, it was the wrong dish entirely. Despite these provocations, Darius and Michelle maintained their composure. They politely requested the correct order and continued their conversation, seemingly unaffected by the poor service. Their grace under pressure only served to further agitate Anton. As the night progressed, Anton's attempts to unsettle the couple grew bolder. He walked past their table, loudly commenting on the restaurant's usual clientele and how certain elements might not appreciate the refined atmosphere. Darius and Michelle exchanged a knowing glance, but remained calm. Their dignified response to the mounting hostility was a silent rebellion against Anton's prejudice, and it was driving him to the edge. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, Anton approached their table. His face was flushed, his demeanor barely concealing his contempt. "I hope you're enjoying your evening," he said, his tone dripping with insincerity. "Though I must say, I'm surprised you chose Chateau Lumiere for such a special occasion. It's not exactly the kind of place where I'd expect to see, well, people like you." The restaurant fell silent, other patrons finally taking notice of the confrontation unfolding before them. Darius looked up at Anton, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for clearing that up, Mr. Vivaldi," Darius replied, his voice steady and controlled. Anton, emboldened by what he perceived as submission, pressed on. "I think it's best if you leave now. We have a certain standard to maintain here, and frankly, your presence is making other guests uncomfortable." Michelle stood, her eyes meeting Anton's with an intensity that made him falter for a moment. "We understand perfectly, Mr. Vivaldi. We'll be on our way." As they gathered their belongings, Anton's smug satisfaction was palpable. He believed he had successfully protected his establishment's image, oblivious to the true nature of the couple he had just insulted. Darius and Michelle walked towards the exit, their heads held high. As they passed Anton, Darius paused for a moment. "You've made your position clear, Mr. Vivaldi. We won't trouble you any further. Tonight." There was something in Darius's tone, a hint of something more that Anton couldn't quite place. It left him with an uneasy feeling as he watched the couple depart. As the restaurant doors closed behind Darius and Michelle, Anton's smug satisfaction began to waver. What hidden power did this couple possess that could turn his world upside down? The answer would soon shatter everything Anton thought he knew about success, privilege, and the true cost of prejudice. Anton Vivaldi stood at the entrance of Chateau Lumiere, watching Darius and Michelle Lewis walk away. His lips curled into a self-satisfied smirk, convinced he had successfully protected his establishment's reputation. The other patrons inside had returned to their meals, the tension in the air dissipating like smoke. "Good riddance," Anton muttered under his breath, straightening his tie. He turned back to the restaurant, ready to bask in what he perceived as a victory. But as he took a step forward, a nagging feeling tugged at the edges of his consciousness. Something about the couple's demeanor as they left didn't sit right with him. Outside, Darius and Michelle walked arm in arm down the sidewalk, their steps measured and unhurried. To anyone passing by, they might have looked like any other couple out for an evening stroll. But beneath their calm exterior, a quiet determination burned. "Are you okay?" Darius asked softly, giving Michelle's hand a gentle squeeze. Michelle nodded, her eyes flashing with resolve. "I'm fine, just processing." They walked in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city filling the space between them. Finally, Michelle spoke again, her voice low but firm. "We can't let this stand, Darius. Not just for us, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than because of the color of their skin." Darius nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I was thinking the same thing. You know, I've been looking for a new investment opportunity. Maybe it's time we expanded our portfolio into the restaurant business." Michelle raised an eyebrow, catching his meaning immediately. "You think Chateau Lumiere might be for sale?" "Everything's for sale at the right price," Darius replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "And I have a feeling Mr. Vivaldi might be more inclined to sell once he realizes who we really are." As they reached their car, a sleek black luxury sedan, Michelle paused. "Have a good evening," she said softly, echoing her parting words to Anton. But this time, there was a hint of steel beneath the politeness. Darius opened the car door for his wife, then walked around to the driver's side. As he settled into his seat, he pulled out his phone. "I think it's time we made a few calls, don't you?" Michelle nodded, her expression resolute. "Absolutely. Let's start with our lawyer. I have a feeling we're going to need her expertise." As Darius started the car, the couple shared a look of understanding. Their 15th anniversary celebration might have been ruined, but they were far from defeated. In fact, this was just the beginning. Back at Chateau Lumiere, Anton was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. He moved through the restaurant, basking in the admiration of his regular patrons, completely oblivious to the fact that his actions had set in motion a chain of events that would soon rock his world to its very foundation. The wheels of justice often turn slowly, but for Anton, they were about to spin at breakneck speed. What unexpected twist awaited him in the days following his confrontation with Darius and Michelle? Life at Chateau Lumiere continued as usual in the wake of the incident. Anton Vivaldi moved through his restaurant with an air of smug satisfaction, convinced he had successfully protected his establishment's reputation. He greeted his regular patrons with practiced charm, basking in their admiration and praise. But beneath the surface, a subtle current of unease began to grow. Anton found himself glancing at the door more often, half expecting to see Darius and Michelle walk in again. He shook off the feeling, telling himself he was being ridiculous. After all, he had made it clear they weren't welcome. On a Wednesday afternoon, as Anton sat in his office reviewing the week's receipts, his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Vivaldi, this just arrived for you," she said, handing him a thick envelope. Anton's eyes narrowed as he read the return address. Blackstone and Associates, a prestigious law firm known for handling high-profile cases. With a frown, Anton tore open the envelope and began to read. As his eyes scanned the formal, professional language, his face grew pale. The letter spoke of potential buyers for Chateau Lumière, buyers who were willing to pay well above market value for the property. But it was the names that made Anton's blood run cold. Darius and Michelle Lewis. Anton's mind raced. Could these be the same Darius and Michelle he had kicked out of his restaurant? He tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence, but a nagging feeling in his gut told him otherwise. He read the letter again, more carefully this time. The offer was serious, potentially lucrative, but the thought of selling his beloved restaurant to the very people he had dismissed so callously made Anton's stomach churn. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, Anton's composure started to crumble. He paced his office, muttering to himself, trying to make sense of this unexpected turn of events. How could he have been so blind? So foolish? In a panic, Anton grabbed his phone and began making frantic calls. He needed to know more about Darius and Michelle Lewis. Who were they really? How had they amassed such wealth? And why, after the way he had treated them, would they want to buy his restaurant? With each piece of information he gathered, Anton's sense of dread grew. Darius and Michelle weren't just wealthy. They were powerful, respected figures in the business world. They had connections that reached far beyond anything Anton could have imagined. As the day wore on, Anton's world seemed to shrink around him. The restaurant that had once been his pride and joy now felt like a trap. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to fall into a chasm of his own making. That night, as he locked up the restaurant, Anton paused at the entrance. He looked around at the elegant decor, the pristine tables, the bar where he had spent so many evenings holding court. For the first time, he wondered if this might be one of the last times he would stand here as the owner. The weight of his actions bore down on him, heavier than ever before. He had allowed his prejudices to blind him, and now he was facing consequences he never could have anticipated. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Anton Vivaldi was a man on the brink of losing everything he had worked for, all because he had failed to see the true value of the people he had so carelessly dismissed. Anton's world was about to be turned upside down. As he prepared for the most important meeting of his life, he couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Would this be the moment that changed everything, or would his pride be his ultimate downfall? The negotiation room at Blackstone and Associates felt unnaturally quiet as Anton Vivaldi stepped inside. His eyes widened in shock as he recognized the couple seated at the far end of the table. Darius and Michelle Lewis, the very same pair he had so callously dismissed from his restaurant, now sat before him as potential buyers. Anton's discomfort was palpable as he took his seat, his usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous fidgeting. Across the table, Darius and Michelle maintained a professional composure, their expressions revealing nothing of the tension that hung in the air. "Mr. Vivaldi," Darius began, his voice steady and controlled. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. As you're aware, we're interested in purchasing Chateau Lumière." Anton nodded stiffly, unable to find his voice. Michelle opened a folder and slid a document across the table. "Our offer is well above market value," she explained, her tone businesslike. "We believe it's more than fair, given the restaurant's reputation and potential. As Anton scanned the figures, his eyes grew wide. The amount was indeed substantial, far more than he had ever imagined his restaurant could fetch. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of excitement before reality came crashing back down. However, Darius continued, his gaze fixed on Anton, we have additional conditions that must be met for this deal to proceed. Anton's stomach dropped. He knew, deep down, that this was where the other shoe would drop. Darius didn't disappoint. First, you must step away from Chateau Lumiere completely. No advisory roles, no consulting positions. Clean break, Darius stated firmly. Second, you agree not to compete in the restaurant industry for a period of 5 years. The weight of these conditions hit Anton like a physical blow. Chateau Lumiere was his life's work, his legacy. The thought of walking away entirely, of being barred from the industry he loved, felt like a knife twisting in his gut. As Anton struggled to process these demands, Michelle leaned forward slightly. At our firm, we prioritize integrity in all our dealings, Mr. Vivaldi. Your behavior the other night revealed a great deal about your true character. Anton felt a flush of shame creep up his neck. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came out. What could he possibly say to justify his actions? If you choose to decline, Michelle continued, her voice cool and collected, we'll walk away from this deal. And rest assured, everyone will know the reason why. The threat of public exposure hung in the air, like a sword over Anton's head. He could already imagine the headlines, the whispers, the looks of disgust from his peers. His reputation, carefully cultivated over years, would be in tatters. As the silence stretched on, Anton found himself at a crossroads. On one side lay his pride, his unwillingness to admit he had been wrong. On the other, the chance to walk away with a substantial sum and, perhaps, a shred of dignity intact. The internal struggle played out on Anton's face as he weighed his options. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. The very people he had dismissed as unworthy now held his future in their hands. Finally, with a deep sigh that seemed to deflate his entire being, Anton nodded. I accept your terms, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Darius and Michelle exchanged a brief glance, before Darius pushed the contract towards Anton. As he picked up the pen to sign, Anton couldn't help but reflect on how quickly his world had changed. In a matter of days, he had gone from being the king of his domain to a man stripped of his crown, all because of his own prejudice and short-sightedness. As the ink dried on Anton's signature, sealing his fate, little did he know that his troubles were only beginning. How would the community react when they learned of his true colors? The fall from grace that awaited him would shake the very foundations of his carefully constructed world. Word of Anton Vivaldi's racist behavior spread through the community like wildfire. What started as hushed whispers in the city's elite circles soon became loud conversations in cafes and boardrooms. The story of how he had treated Darius and Michelle Lewis, now the new owners of Chateau Lumiere, became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice and arrogance. Former clients and investors, once eager to be associated with Anton and his prestigious restaurant, began to distance themselves. Invitations to social events dried up, and business partners suddenly became unavailable for meetings. The elite clientele that had once filled Chateau Lumiere's tables now shunned the very mention of Anton's name. As news of the incident spread, former employees came forward with their own stories of subtle racism and discrimination under Anton's management. These revelations only added fuel to the fire, further damaging Anton's already tarnished reputation. The community's reaction was swift and merciless, transforming Anton from a respected restaurateur to a social pariah almost overnight. Meanwhile, Chateau Lumiere, was undergoing a remarkable transformation under its new ownership. Darius and Michelle Lewis brought a fresh perspective to the restaurant, emphasizing inclusivity and diversity. They revamped the menu to include a wider range of culinary influences, hired a diverse staff, and implemented policies to ensure all guests felt welcome, regardless of their background. The contrast between the old Chateau Lumière and the new was stark. Where once there had been an atmosphere of exclusivity and elitism, now there was warmth and openness. Regular patrons marveled at the change, and word quickly spread about the restaurant's positive new direction. As Chateau Lumière flourished under its new management, Anton found himself increasingly isolated. His phone calls went unanswered, his emails unread. The social circles he had once dominated now closed ranks against him. At charity galas and business functions, he found himself standing alone, avoided by those who had once sought his company. The financial impact of Anton's downfall was significant. Investors pulled out of his other ventures, and opportunities that had once seemed guaranteed now evaporated. The wealth and influence he had built over years crumbled in a matter of weeks. Anton's attempts to downplay the incident and salvage his reputation proved futile. Each public statement he made seemed to dig him deeper into the hole he had created for himself. The community had made up its mind about him, and no amount of spin or apology could undo the damage. As days turned into weeks, the story of Anton's fall from grace took on a life of its own. It became a topic of discussion in diversity training sessions at corporations, a case study in business ethics classes, and a rallying point for those fighting against discrimination in the service industry. For Anton, the world he had known was gone. The respect and admiration he had once commanded had been replaced by disdain and avoidance. He found himself questioning everything he had believed about success and power, forced to confront the ugly truth of his own prejudices. Anton's world had crumbled, but his story wasn't over. What happens when a fallen king returns to his former castle, now ruled by those he once scorned? The tables have turned at Chateau Lumière, and Anton was about to face a reckoning he never saw coming. Weeks after the sale of his beloved restaurant, Anton Vivaldi found himself standing across the street from Chateau Lumière, his heart heavy with regret and curiosity. The familiar facade loomed before him, unchanged yet somehow different. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. As Anton approached the entrance, he noticed subtle changes. The signage had been updated, and there was a new energy emanating from within. He reached for the door handle, hesitating for a moment before pulling it open. The familiar chime of the bell above the door rang out, but this time, it felt like a stranger's welcome. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with life. The dining room was full, filled with a diverse crowd that Anton had never seen during his tenure as owner. Laughter and animated conversations floated through the air, creating an atmosphere of warmth and inclusivity that was palpably different from the stuffy exclusivity he had once cultivated. Anton made his way to the host stand, his eyes darting around nervously. The young woman behind the podium smiled politely, showing no signs of recognition. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" The words hit Anton like a punch to the gut. He, who had once been the king of this domain, was now just another face in the crowd. "No, I was hoping to get a table for one," he stammered, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. The host's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're fully booked for the evening. Perhaps I could take your name for our waiting list?" Anton nodded numbly, giving a false name. As he stepped away from the podium, he felt a wave of discomfort wash over him. This was the same treatment he had often instructed his staff to give to those he deemed unworthy of Chateau Lumière's tables. Finding himself without a seat, Anton decided to make his way to the bar. He perched on a stool, feeling out of place in the very establishment he had once ruled. The bartender approached with a friendly smile, again showing no sign of recognizing the former owner. As Anton nursed his drink, he couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation around him. Patrons raved about the new menu, praising its diverse offerings and innovative twists on classic dishes. Others commented on the welcoming atmosphere and the attentive, diverse staff. A couple seated next to Anton at the bar caught his attention. "You know, I never used to come here," the woman said to her companion. "I always felt like I didn't belong, but now, it's become our favorite spot in the city." Her words struck a chord with Anton. He remembered the countless times he had made people feel unwelcome, all in the name of maintaining what he thought was an exclusive atmosphere. Now, he was the one feeling out of place, a stranger in his own creation. As the evening wore on, Anton's discomfort grew. He watched as Darius and Michelle Lewis, the new owners, made their rounds in the dining room. They greeted guests warmly, chatted with staff, and exuded a genuine passion for hospitality that Anton realized he had lost long ago. The final blow came when Anton overheard a nearby server explaining the restaurant's history to a curious guest. "Oh yes, Chateau Lumiere has been around for years, but it's really come into its own since the new owners took over. They've really transformed it into a place where everyone feels welcome." Anton couldn't bear to hear anymore. He settled his bill and made his way to the exit, feeling the weight of his choices bearing down on him. As he reached for the door, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass. The man staring back at him was a shadow of his former self, humbled by the very prejudices he had once wielded so carelessly. As Anton's reflection faded from view, the door of Chateau Lumiere swung shut behind him. But inside, a new chapter was unfolding. The once exclusive establishment had undergone a remarkable transformation under the guidance of Darius and Michelle Lewis. What happens when prejudice is replaced by acceptance and exclusivity gives way to community? The atmosphere inside Chateau Lumiere was electric. The dining room buzzed with energy, filled with a diverse mix of patrons that spanned ages, ethnicities, and backgrounds. Laughter and animated conversations floated through the air, creating a warm and inviting ambiance that was a far cry from the stuffy exclusivity of Anton's era. At the heart of this transformation was the Lewis's commitment to inclusivity. They had reimagined the restaurant's interior, blending classic charm with contemporary touches. The result was a space that felt both luxurious and welcoming, a perfect reflection of their vision for a more open and diverse dining experience. The menu, too, had undergone a dramatic overhaul. Gone were the days of a narrow, Eurocentric focus. In its place was a culinary journey that celebrated flavors from around the world. Traditional French dishes now shared space with innovative fusion creations, each plate telling a story of cultural exchange and culinary creativity. This diversity extended beyond the menu to the staff itself. The restaurant floor was a microcosm of the city's multicultural landscape. Servers, sommeliers, and kitchen staff from various backgrounds worked together seamlessly, their different perspectives contributing to a richer, more dynamic dining experience. Regular patrons marveled at the change. "I've been coming here for years," one diner remarked, "but it's never felt as alive as it does now. There's an energy here that's absolutely infectious." Indeed, the restaurant's reputation had soared under the new management. Food critics raved about the innovative menu and warm atmosphere. Social media buzzed with posts from excited diners, each eager to share their experience at the new Chateau Lumiere. But perhaps the most telling sign of the restaurant's success was its waiting list. Reservations were booked weeks in advance, with people clamoring for a chance to be part of this culinary revolution. The exclusivity that Anton had once cultivated through prejudice and elitism had been replaced by an exclusivity born of genuine popularity and positive word of mouth. The contrast with Anton's previous practices was stark. Where he had seen diversity as a threat to his establishment's prestige, Darius and Michelle recognized it as a strength. They understood that true luxury wasn't about keeping people out, but about creating an experience so exceptional that everyone wanted in. This philosophy extended to their business practices as well. Chateau Lumiere now partnered with local suppliers, supporting small businesses and ensuring a farm-to-table freshness that elevated their dishes. They implemented fair wage policies and created opportunities for staff development, fostering a sense of loyalty and pride among their team. The restaurant had become more than just a place to eat. It was a community hub. Chateau Lumiere hosted cultural events, charity fundraisers, and culinary workshops, all aimed at bringing people together and celebrating diversity. These initiatives not only boosted the restaurant's profile, but also contributed to a more vibrant, connected neighborhood. As the evening wore on, Darius and Michelle made their rounds in the dining room. They greeted guests warmly, chatted with staff, and exuded a genuine passion for hospitality. Their hands-on approach and visible commitment to inclusivity set the tone for the entire establishment. While Chateau Lumiere thrived under new management, its former owner grappled with a different kind of transformation. In the quiet of his apartment, Anton Vivaldi sat alone, staring out the window at the city lights. The bustling energy of the restaurant world he once dominated felt a million miles away. His mind replayed the events that led to his downfall, each memory a sharp reminder of his own prejudice and short-sightedness. Anton's reflection in the window seemed to mock him, a ghost of his former self. He remembered the smug satisfaction he felt when he kicked Darius and Michelle out of his restaurant. Now, that memory filled him with shame. How could he have been so blind? The loss of Chateau Lumiere stung, but it was more than just the financial hit. Anton realized he had lost something far more valuable: his sense of self, his place in the world. The respect and admiration he had once commanded had evaporated overnight, replaced by whispers and averted gazes. As he sat in the growing darkness, Anton began to see his actions in a new light. Each instance of casual racism, each time he had made someone feel unwelcome or less than, now weighed heavily on his conscience. He had always justified his behavior as protecting the restaurant's image, but now he saw it for what it truly was: prejudice, plain and simple. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to maintain what he thought was exclusivity, he had excluded himself from the very community he sought to impress. His prejudices had cost him not just his business, but also potential friendships, partnerships, and opportunities he couldn't even begin to imagine. Anton thought about Darius and Michelle, how they had transformed Chateau Lumiere into a place of warmth and inclusivity. He remembered the energy he had felt in the restaurant that night, the joy and laughter that filled the air. It was everything his version of Chateau Lumiere had lacked, and he had been too blinded by his own biases to see it. As the night wore on, Anton found himself grappling with a difficult question. Could he change? Was it possible to unlearn a lifetime of prejudice? The task seemed daunting, almost impossible. Yet, as he thought about the consequences of his actions, he realized he had no choice but to try. The next morning, Anton made a decision. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he never thought he'd call. The phone rang several times before a familiar voice answered. "Darius Lewis speaking," came the calm, professional tone. Anton hesitated for a moment, his throat suddenly dry. "Mr. Lewis?" he finally managed. "This is Anton Vivaldi. I wonder if we could meet. I owe you and Mrs. Lewis an apology." There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough for Anton to wonder if Darius had hung up. Then, "I appreciate your call, Mr. Vivaldi. I think that's a conversation worth having. How about tomorrow at 2 p.m.? As Anton agreed to the meeting, he felt a mix of emotions: fear, shame, but also a glimmer of hope. He knew this conversation wouldn't undo the harm he had caused, but perhaps it could be the first step on a long journey of change. Anton's story was just the beginning. As news of the incident spread, local business owners found themselves facing an uncomfortable question. Were they unknowingly perpetuating the same biases that had led to Anton's downfall? The ripple effect of Anton Vivaldi's racist behavior and subsequent downfall spread far beyond the walls of Chateau Lumiere. The local business community, once content to operate within the confines of long-held traditions, now found itself thrust into a period of intense self-reflection and reevaluation. Restaurant owners across the city began examining their own practices with a critical eye. Many were shocked to discover subtle biases embedded in their hiring processes, seating arrangements, and even menu selections. The incident at Chateau Lumiere had lifted a veil, revealing a pervasive problem that had gone unnoticed for far too long. In response, a group of forward-thinking restaurateurs formed the Inclusive Dining Initiative. Their goal was to create a set of best practices for promoting diversity and inclusion in the hospitality industry. Workshops and training sessions were organized, focusing on topics such as unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and the importance of diverse representation in both staff and clientele. The impact wasn't limited to the restaurant industry. Retail stores, hotels, and other service-oriented businesses began to take notice. The Chamber of Commerce held a series of town hall meetings to discuss ways to make the city more welcoming to all residents and visitors. These gatherings brought together business owners, community leaders, and citizens from all walks of life, fostering dialogue and understanding. One particularly moving moment came during a public forum when a longtime resident stood up to share her experiences. "For years I felt invisible in certain parts of this city," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But now, I see businesses actively working to make everyone feel welcome. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders." The media played a crucial role in amplifying these changes. Local newspapers and TV stations ran features on businesses that were leading the charge in promoting inclusivity. These stories not only highlighted positive examples, but also put pressure on other establishments to follow suit. As the movement gained momentum, even skeptics began to take notice. Some business owners who had initially resisted change, fearing it might alienate their traditional customer base, were surprised to find that embracing diversity actually expanded their clientele. One such owner, a third-generation jeweler, admitted, "I was wrong. Opening our doors wider hasn't diluted our brand. It's made us stronger." The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Some long-standing patrons of exclusive establishments grumbled about the changes, clinging to outdated notions of prestige. However, their voices were increasingly drowned out by a growing chorus of support for a more inclusive community. Perhaps the most significant impact was on the younger generation of entrepreneurs. New businesses opening in the wake of the Chateau Lumiere incident made inclusivity a cornerstone of their operations from day one. They saw diversity not as a checkbox to tick, but as a fundamental aspect of their business model and company culture. As months passed, the city began to feel different. The atmosphere in shops and restaurants was noticeably more relaxed and welcoming. Tourists commented on the warm reception they received, regardless of their background. The city's reputation began to shift, attracting a more diverse range of visitors and new residents. The incident that had seemed like a scandal at first had become a catalyst for positive change. It sparked conversations that were long overdue and pushed the community to confront uncomfortable truths about prejudice and privilege. As the city embraced change, Chateau Lumiere stood as a beacon of transformation. But what became of Darius and Michelle, the couple who sparked this revolution? Their next move would redefine success in ways no one expected. Chateau Lumiere buzzed with energy, its tables filled with a diverse crowd, enjoying innovative dishes that blended culinary traditions from around the world. Darius and Michelle Lewis moved through the dining room, greeting guests and chatting with staff. Their faces glowed with pride as they took in the vibrant atmosphere they had created. It had been a year since they took over the restaurant, transforming it from an exclusive enclave into a welcoming haven for food lovers of all backgrounds. The change hadn't been easy, but the results spoke for themselves. Chateau Lumiere was now the hottest reservation in town, with a waiting list that stretched for weeks. As they made their rounds, Darius and Michelle exchanged knowing glances. They had accomplished so much, but they knew this was just the beginning. In the quiet moments between courses, they often found themselves discussing their next steps. How could they expand their vision of inclusivity beyond the walls of Chateau Lumiere? Their answer came in the form of a mentorship program for aspiring chefs from underrepresented communities. Darius and Michelle partnered with local culinary schools to offer internships and training opportunities at Chateau Lumiere. They wanted to ensure that the next generation of chefs would have the chance to showcase their talents, regardless of their background. The program quickly gained attention, attracting both up-and-coming chefs and established restaurateurs eager to learn from the Lewis's success. Soon, Darius and Michelle found themselves speaking at industry events, sharing their story and advocating for more diverse and inclusive practices in the culinary world. As their influence grew, so did their ambitions. They began exploring opportunities to open new restaurants, each with its own unique concept, but all sharing the same core: values of inclusivity and excellence. Their goal was to create a network of establishments that would serve as a model for the industry, proving that diversity and success could go hand in hand. But even as they looked to the future, Darius and Michelle never forgot the incident that had brought them to this point. They often reflected on that night at Chateau Lumiere, when they were turned away because of their race. The memory still stung, but they had chosen to channel that pain into positive action. One day, as they were planning their latest venture, Darius received an unexpected call. It was Anton Vivaldi, the former owner of Chateau Lumiere. Anton had reached out to apologize and ask for a meeting. After some discussion, Darius and Michelle agreed. The meeting was tense at first, with years of hurt and misunderstanding hanging in the air. But as Anton spoke, his voice heavy with regret, something shifted. He talked about how watching Chateau Lumiere thrive under their leadership had forced him to confront his own biases. He admitted that he had been wrong and expressed a genuine desire to learn and change. Darius and Michelle listened carefully, their expressions guarded, but not unkind. They had long since moved past anger, but forgiveness was a more complex journey. Still, they recognized the courage it took for Anton to reach out, and they saw an opportunity to turn this moment into something positive. In a surprising turn of events, they invited Anton to participate in a panel discussion on diversity in the restaurant industry. It would be a chance for him to share his story of transformation and for others to learn from his mistakes. Anton, humbled by their offer, agreed. The panel discussion became a powerful moment of reckoning for the local business community. Anton's honest account of his fall from grace, coupled with Darius and Michelle's story of resilience and success, sparked deep conversations about bias and inclusion. It was a reminder that change was possible, even for those who seemed set in their ways. As Darius and Michelle continued to expand their influence, they never lost sight of their core mission. Each new restaurant they opened, each mentorship program they launched, was a step towards creating a more inclusive culinary landscape. They knew the fight against prejudice was ongoing, but they were committed to leading by example. Their story became a source of inspiration for many, proving that it was possible to overcome discrimination and build something truly remarkable. But Darius and Michelle knew their work was far from over. There were still barriers to break, minds to change, and tables to set where everyone would feel welcome. Anton's downfall and Darius and Michelle's success teach us a powerful lesson about the dangers of prejudice and the value of inclusivity. By judging people based on their character rather than superficial traits, we open ourselves up to a world of opportunities and connections. As viewers, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on our own biases. How might they be limiting our personal and professional growth? Challenging these preconceptions can lead to richer experiences and more diverse perspectives in our lives. In our increasingly connected world, embracing open-mindedness isn't just morally right, it's essential for success. Whether in business or personal relationships, making a conscious effort to be more inclusive can lead to unexpected rewards. So, ask yourself, what small step can you take today to create a more welcoming environment in your own sphere of influence?